great to be joined by the 2020 Westgate SuperContest champion. And some of you might know him a little bit better for what he does on the felt, as he's a professional poker player, as we're joined by David Baker. And David, hopefully your your divisional round of the NFL went well, and it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Went 4-0,
Nice.
picked all four winners, and sprinkled in a few totals that won. So perfect weekend. So yeah, it wasn't the barn burner games that I think maybe as fans we kind of wanted, but from a betting perspective, couldn't have gone any better for me. I mean, it was just most of them were no sweaters. Got the back door in Jacksonville, but I think it was the right side anyway. But yeah, it was really nice to just have a no sweat weekend.
Yep, and those are some of the best out there as well, because it is so hard to find no sweat winners, especially in the NFL where the margins are typically so thin. And I thought that this was going to be a game that was going to be involving a sweat. When I took the Bengals getting the points, I was thinking, all right, this is probably going to be a 3-point game. I'm able to get north of 3. You know what? Good value here. Didn't think that the Bengals would be able to get there and win by a count of 27-10, but they were able to. David, I'm not sure about you, but it felt like people made too much out of these offensive line injuries for the Cincinnati Bengals. They were left with a line that was relatively similar to what they utilized to make the Super Bowl last year, and it felt like people were just trying to get too smart and were trying to fade the Bengals for really reasons that were head-scratching to me.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, this is a nice lesson in fade the noise. There was a lot of noise all week about the offensive line, and it felt like they baked that into the line. I mean, I really felt like this should have been a field goal line, and it just kept getting pushed further and further up. And when it hit 6, I was like, perfect. I mean, this is what I've been waiting for. I would have gladly taken it at 4, 5, 5.5, but kind of when it creeps up from 4 to 5.5, it's most likely just going to hit that 6 number, because they're just kind of, anybody who's taking the favorite is just going to take it at that point. So I kind of felt really, really good about that. I'm with you on that. I mean, the offensive line obviously was a little concerning, but it was similar to the one that they were pretty close to winning the Super Bowl and got to the Super Bowl last year. And at the end of the day, the market just doesn't respect the Bengals, or it hasn't respected the Bengals. They're on, I think, a 21-5 against the spread streak. The Bills, we've wanted to be great. We've wanted to be good all year. But at the end of it, I mean, I kept wanting them to be what I wanted them to be. But my eyes and my brain were telling me this team just didn't have it this year. And I was happy to fade them and happy to be able to get the Bengals at a nice premium and a nice little healthy money line. And I mean, the Bengals have been playing the best football in the NFL, so it really didn't surprise me that this game was a no sweater. I mean, if this game was tomorrow and the line was even, I would bet them again. I mean, they seem like the better team, and it really didn't even seem close.
Absolutely, and I know that you mentioned this with the Cincinnati Bengals. If you want to go the last 2 years, regular season and postseason, Bengals 27-12 against the spread. That's pretty stinking good right there. If you've been betting the Bengals and doing nothing else but betting them on the spread, you're up a little bit over 13.8 units or so, if I did the math correctly. So, yeah, that is going very, very well for them. And with the Cincinnati Bengals, it's going to be interesting to see how they match up with the Kansas City Chiefs. And certainly towards the back half of this conversation, we're going to be discussing what we could expect out of the Kansas City Chiefs. But that said, they were able to get it done, but they don't get the cover against the Jacksonville Jaguars. We have seen this how many times out of the Kansas City Chiefs, where they get the outright win as a north of a touchdown favorite, but they do not get the cover. And I thought for Jacksonville, it was a nice gritty game for them. I think that the future is very bright. If you're looking at 2024 futures, they are not a bad look at all to be able to win the division, to be able to make some noise in the AFC. But that said, the Kansas City Chiefs were able to get it done, but as we know, it didn't come without a cost.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the Chiefs, but let's first give our due to the Jags, who were left for dead midseason and poured it on nicely. Left for dead halftime of the Charger game came on nicely, and most of the experts and sharp people that I heard all week just thought that it was Kansas City roll show. We did get there on the back door, unless you got it at 10, which it was, uh, just briefly at 10. But for those of us who had it at 9.5 or lower, got there at the end. But I don't. I mean, we got lucky. Obviously, whenever you get a score with 30 seconds left, especially when it's a field goal, when it's a 10-point game, it's a little luck. But a lot went against them to get to this point to begin with. I mean, Agnew fumbles the ball at the 3-yard line. They were almost for sure going to score something there. The Jags dropped a short interception. Granted, Mahomes was not full Mahomes, but I thought this Jacksonville team played with him nicely, and it was a nice building block and kind of what you expect. When teams traditionally get there, it's kind of built over multiple seasons, and this was a really good step for them. They went out about where they should. They gave them a fight, but in the end, the experience of the Chiefs just went ahead and did them in. The Chiefs played well, but I still feel like there's just something missing for this team. Travis Kelce, absolute beast, but I find myself unimpressed by the outside weapons and the running game of the Chiefs, and it's a big jump in opponent this week when you're going to play the Bengals. So obviously they're going to need a full Mahomes. I think the line that came out, which we'll discuss later, is kind of reflective on a half Mahomes. I don't really necessarily think the line is going to stay where it's at. But the Chiefs just do what they need to do. I mean, they're well coached. They have a great quarterback, and they have a lot of veterans on the team. So they handled their business, and now they sat there and watched what I think they hoped would be this outcome. But be careful what you wish for. They're 0-3, and over the last 2 years against the Bengals. So they've got a feisty team with a lot of confidence coming to see them this week.
And I will say this, we'll dive into the NFC side of things in the next segment, but in terms of what we're getting in the Final Four, the NFC Championship game and the AFC Championship game, at minimum, among your top 5 teams in the NFL, you've got all 4 in. You could say that you've got the best 4 in, and I wouldn't debate you there. You could throw the Bills in there ahead of a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, what have you, and I wouldn't have any gripes there. But what I think is so refreshing is that we see it so many times in the NCAA tournament where you get that 11 seed that they make the Final Four, and then they just get dump trucked when they make it to the Final Four, like a Loyola Chicago, like a George Mason. You're able to go down the list. But we've got, in my opinion, if not the best 4 teams in the NFL remaining, 4 of the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, every week on this show, we've basically broken into, an elite tier, and that elite tier was always Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, the Eagles. And there was a time period where the Cowboys were in there, and there was a time period where the Niners were in there. I think basically the last month, the Cowboys kind of fell out of that top 5, the top 6 to make it a top 5. And I think really, as long as you got those 2 teams in the NFC that we've gotten, and any of the two of the 3, Chiefs, Bengals, Buffalo, then we could say that you got the best 4 teams or 4 of the top 5. I think what the Bengals did to the Bills over the first quarter of the game that ended up getting no contest, and then the 4 quarters here, I don't even think you really can put a logical debate up there that Buffalo is better than Cincinnati at this point. Maybe Buffalo might be better versus some teams, but the Cincinnati team is better than them. I mean, at the end of the day, it just kind of is what it is. I mean, they whooped them. They whooped them on their home field, and it never really was even close. So, and I do have to say, I mean, Zach Taylor gets a lot of heat nationally. I don't think, when we're talking about the great coaches in the league, he never gets mentioned. He seems to do some things from time to time, but he had a really great game plan versus a very tough Bills team, both offensively and defensively. And, he was told all week that this offensive line was problems. Well, then if you're going to believe that narrative, then you got to give him credit for scheming up an attack to not get swamped by this Bills pass rush. I mean, Burrow got sacked once out of 37 dropbacks. So props to Zach Taylor there, too.
Absolutely, and they were able to overcome the elements. They get the job done against the Buffalo Bills, and we've got to talk next about the two NFC teams that were able to get the job done over the weekend with our good friend David Baker here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Great to be rejoined by 2020 Westgate SuperContest champion David Baker. And David, we took a look at the AFC side of things to lead things off. Now let's take a look at the NFC side of things, and I want to start off by going back to Saturday because among all the performances that we saw this weekend, I feel like the Eagles had the most dominant performance. They just completely laid waste to the New York Giants. At no point was this a game, and there was a lot of questions as to what we were going to be finding out of Jalen Hurts. Was he going to be 100%? Was he going to be not able to be as mobile as he was just towards the beginning part of the season? And in my opinion, they did a great job of laying all those questions to rest. How they come back this week is a little bit of a question mark, but that said, Eagles looked really, really good on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, this is the Eagles team that we've seen all year. Besides the last few weeks without Hurts, this is just another example of fade the noise as far as I'm concerned. Look, these playoffs have really been an example, as far as I'm concerned, of pay attention to what's going on in the regular season and don't fall into the noise that you're hearing, immediately. This Tampa Bay Dallas game that we had that we didn't get a chance to discuss because it happened afterwards, but we came on this show week after week saying this Tampa Bay team was terrible. Don't fall for it. And sure enough, so many people fell for this Tampa Bay team. The Eagles, we came on this show and we've been saying this team is a juggernaut. This is the real deal. And yet I heard so much of the media just jump on the Giants bandwagon just because they beat a Minnesota team that everybody said was fraudulent. Look, there's a big difference between throwing the ball into wide open spaces that the Minnesota Vikings gave the Giants and trying to force the ball when James Bradbury and Darius Slay are blanketing your receivers that are, fringe starters in the NFL, let alone ones and twos. They're fringe even roster players. So I think this just all goes back to a similar, thing that we discussed with the Bengals. It's, look at these teams for the entire year. And this Eagles team was a great football team. And in my opinion, Jalen Hurts deserves to be the MVP of the National Football League. I was not a huge Jalen fan for a while, but I have become one. And look, this team was a dominant team with him. He went out. He was out for a few weeks. They lost. He came back. And now look at this team again. And it just begins, and it begins with him. He takes care of the football. He doesn't make mistakes. He progresses his reads. If nothing's there, he runs. And yeah, this Philadelphia team was the powerhouse we expected. And the one issue with them is they do have a tendency to take their foot off the gas in the second half. And I that may present a problem in the next game or the Super Bowl if they get there. But against a team like the Giants, they obviously didn't have anything to really worry about. But very, very impressive performance. Sirianni, did the job. The Devontae Smith was great. Goddard was great. Jalen was great. Bradbury was great. Sirianni called a great game. It was just a dominating performance by the Eagles on their home crowd. And, like we did with the Jags, props to the Giants. I mean, if you said at the beginning of the year that they were going to make the Final Four in the conference, you would have just been ecstatic. So I'm not going to take anything away from what the Giants have done this year. They're building something there with Dable. And, I for one hope they re-sign Daniel Jones because I do think that he's a really good quarterback despite, how he played this week.
And I'm glad that you gave some credit to the Giants there as well because, what Brian Dable was able to do, because the Giants, if you took a look at things, you were able to get better odds on them to have the worst record in the league than to be able to find them really in a spot where they would be even contending for the NFC title or anything of that nature. Their top wide receiver in this game was Richie James, who had 7 receptions. Nobody else had more than 2. So, I mean, there was really no weapons whatsoever to be had for the Giants. Really, the only guy that they signed for a wide receiver was Kenny Golladay, and he should be going around in a ski mask for the rest of his life because he is stealing money right now from the New York Giants. And, well, yeah, they were able to still make it to the divisional round of the playoffs. You got to give a lot of credit where credit is due to the Giants, but the Eagles, they're just, in my opinion, right now, the best team out there in the NFC. They are going to be going up against a 49ers team that they don't have quite the quarterback that the Eagles do. There's no question about it, but this defense, it just bears down on you. They were able to really hold down the Dallas Cowboys. They get it done by a count of 19-12. What were your overall thoughts on this game? Because no doubt about it, it wasn't necessarily any sort of a dominant display from the 49ers on offense, but that defense put on a clinic.
Yeah, I mean this game they're not gonna they're not gonna hang this one in the Louvre. It wasn't like it was a super well played game or dominant performance. It was definitely the game that was the most in flux of all the games this weekend, and I think we kind of considered that that was probably going to be the case. I mean, it did have the lowest spread coming in. The Giants played well. The Niners played well. I mean, the Niners are just too tough. I mean, they're just so physical, and I'm really interested in this week's game is really going to be interesting because this is the first time that either of these teams get to go up against another team that is equally as physical as they are. Kyle Shanahan, absolutely, in my opinion, the number one coach in the NFL. He gets it done with all different types of players, with all types of mediocre quarterbacks. Brock Purdy did a, did what he needed to do. He did a good job. He got away with a couple. There were a couple balls that definitely could have been intercepted. But look, he stood in there and he made some throws. And credit to Shanahan for having the guts to put the ball in Purdy's hands late in this game. I was sitting here on my chair with 2 minutes and 5 seconds left. Said this is a perfect spot that they could throw the ball because if you run it, you're probably going to get tackled up the middle with 2:01 left, and they're going to call a timeout on that side of the 2-minute warning. Pass plays usually take a little bit longer. If they can run a safe pass play, they can get to the 2-minute warning, and he did more than that. I mean, he delivered a strike and picked up 15 yards and kind of set up the end of the game. So Purdy did what he needed to do, and I really do credit him. I don't, it's a big step up in class going to Philly. I mean, he had the home field behind him here, and I'm really excited for this football game. It is going to be a really great game. I'm not 100% who I'm picking on this one, but I do think it's a great game, and I'm sure we'll talk about that next segment. Dallas again, McCarthy punted in a few spots, probably shouldn't have. Dak, little careless with the ball. But all in all, I mean, I do have to say that I do think the Cowboys played a pretty good game. CeeDee Lamb, I mean, he's slowly joining the elite tier of receivers. I think he was kind of on the outside looking in. He's showing that he can really be a dominant receiver in this league. So I think the Cowboys really regret not signing Amari Cooper. I really think that was the difference. They really didn't have a number 2 weapon. And obviously losing Pollard hurt, but at the end of the day, he's, a running back. And I know he's good, but running backs really, games aren't really turned on based on running backs for the most part.
Yep, and it was so interesting because they were having all those rumors about perhaps Odell Beckham Jr. is going to be going for the Dallas Cowboys and everything like that. Never ended up materializing. And I'm so glad that you brought up Kyle Shanahan because I do think that in terms of what we're going to be seeing in the NFC and AFC championship games as well, I'm not sure if you'd agree/disagree, but I was talking about how we've got 4 of the top 5 teams in there. I would say at minimum among your top 7, maybe 8 coaches, you've got 4 of them that aren't going to be on display this weekend as well.
Yeah, Sirianni has been super impressive. I mean, not only does he call a good game, but I feel like he manages the game well. Not only in this game, I mean, he got a little funky there trying to draw some offsides and stuff, but he's done that throughout the year. And he kind of brought that, push Jalen in the butt for a couple yards, and then he ran a play off of it this week where he pitched it out, and his time management seems to be pretty good. I'm impressed with Sirianni. I don't think this is a coaching mismatch, even though I do think Shanahan's the best coach in the league. And then we've got some great coaches this weekend to watch. So yeah, I'm excited for this week.
I am excited as well. We've got two great games for the NFC and AFC Championship, and we're going to be talking about those next with David Baker. On the flip side, here on the Greg Peterson Experience, I'm VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Great to be rejoined by David Baker. Does great work as a professional poker player. Does a great job taking a look at the betting aspect of things as he is the 2020 Westgate SuperContest champion. And David, we just recapped how we've gotten here. Now let's take a look at these two NFC/AFC championship games. And before we do that, I just want to throw this out there. Would there be any way that you'd be taking a look at any sort of futures bet right now? Because I take a look at the futures board and it's very tightly knit together. I get these via DraftKings. Chiefs are at plus 250 to win the Super Bowl. Bengals plus 265. The Eagles are also plus 265, and the 49ers are plus 320. If I were to take a look at this right now, I would just put it on the money line of the team that I think is going to win. And then if they make the Super Bowl, just put it on them again, roll it over, because I think that you get a better payout than what you get just taking a look at a flat future right now.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is all these numbers are pretty accurate. I've never seen where all four teams are so closely bunched. So this just means we're going to have a really tight line in the Super Bowl. I personally am not a Chiefs believer, but if you are a Chiefs believer and you think Mahomes is the second coming, then if I was going to do anything, maybe I would think about that, because I could see that if he practices all week, that line might move up. And if he goes out and has a good performance and he wins, that they would be the only ones that I could see maybe being a substantial favorite in the Super Bowl. I'm not going to do it that way because I'm not personally a Chiefs believer or backer. So I will most likely be just fading the Chiefs in either or both matchups if they happen to get there. So if the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, I'll probably be booking a couple of losses personally.
And I do think that it is so interesting to take a look at that game because we've seen it move down. If you like the Kansas City Chiefs, you could probably still make more money just rolling it over, because right now their money line in this game against the Cincinnati Bengals, it's moved down to right around minus 115, minus 120 in a lot of spots, because the spread, I'm seeing it at South Point as a pick'em. I'm seeing it in other spots like the Westgate, where I sit at circa between 1.5, and I think that this is just all about the news that we see throughout the week. If the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be having Patrick Mahomes have everything look full go for him, things of that nature, I do think that this could be a number that it moves back to the opener of 2, but I think that that's really the max that it moves to. I don't think that this is going to be a number that moves through 3, so if you like the Cincinnati Bengals, I think you probably take it now and you just be happy with what you've got, because like I said, I don't think that this at any point gets to 3, and if the news is bad on Patrick Mahomes, this could flip to the Bengals, perhaps even being a favorite.
I hear what you're saying. I kind of think about it opposite. As far as I'm concerned, if I don't really think there's any way Mahomes misses the game. So I'm not really seeing that it's gonna, drastically shift, like he's gonna be out or anything. And if he starts practicing and he looks good in practice, I could really see this line moving upwards and hitting 3. If it doesn't hit 3, I don't really think it matters if you're -2, +2. You either believe in that Mahomes is superhuman and would play and succeed while not practicing all week, and that you're not a believer in the Bengals, or the opposite. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be backing the Bengals, and I think Mahomes will be fine. And I'm just hoping that he practices all week, because I want this line to move up, and I want to be able to get more value just in case the Chiefs pull it out at the end. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm attacking it. I don't really think there's any key numbers at this point, so I think it's just worth it just to see if Mahomes is somehow ruled out. then there's really not a number that I'm not going to like the Bengals at. And if he's ruled in, I think it just begins to move up. Um, and I only say that just because the Bengals have been completely disrespected by the betting market the entire year. And granted, they've come off of the most dominating performance that we've seen from them. So that may, help keep this line down a little bit. But I was seeing a projected line before the game played today that if the Bengals won, that it would be upwards of 5. So I think it moves back. I think it moves back up if Mahomes looks decent, and if he doesn't, then I'm not really worried about it. It's not really any key numbers anyway. What's the difference? It flips from -1.5 to, or +1.5 to -1.5, or -2. It's all kind of the same to me.
Yeah, but if you're just below that number of 3, it is a very much a horse apiece situation just because you don't get a lot of games that land 1 or 2. It takes very exceptional circumstances to be able to get there. And what I do think is significant, what you were talking about, is if Chad Henne plays, and I am right there with you. I don't think that Chad Henne is going to be the starter in this game. Could he finish the game? I think that that's an interesting question, but I don't think that there's any way that you don't have Patrick Mahomes as a starter. At the very, very minimum, I think that he at the very least gives it a go, tries to be able to get in there, so perhaps that provides some value on some Patrick Mahomes unders in terms of his player props as well. We shall see, and we're going to be finding out more as the week rolls along. And then in terms of 49ers versus Eagles, this is a number that opened up with the Eagles being a 1.5 point favorite in a lot of spots. Now we're finding them as a 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 45.5. Where do you stand on this game? Because I do think that the line move, it is correct. Anything below a field goal, I think is relatively solid value on the Eagles.
Well, I think we're seeing with both of these line openers that people are really waiting what they've seen recently. The Bengals line opened up significantly lower than it was projected to, and the betting markets had the Niners as a bigger favorite to win the NFC than the Eagles going into this weekend, while at the same time the Eagles were laying 8 and the Niners were laying 4 or 3.5. So to me, this game was supposed to open up as the Niners as a favorite. And I think, although Purdy looked okay, he did get lucky. There were a lot of dropped interceptions, and Philly just, was surgical in their performance. That being said, I do think that physically, the way that the Niners win is just physically. And the Eagles can combat that somewhat. They do have impressive offensive and defensive lines. So I'm with you on this one. I'm leaning Philly early. My initial leans are Philly and Bengals in the Super Bowl. But I'm not necessarily going to get tied into this pick yet because I really want to think about it and see what I like, just because I do respect the Niners, and I do respect what Shanahan and what he's done with this team. And Purdy wasn't perfect, but he was pretty good. And the fact that Shanahan trusted him late in that game really kind of told me a lot. I mean, Shanahan knows this guy better than any of us could possibly know him. So he trusts him. And if Shanahan trusts him, I mean, I got to trust him too. So I'm not going to go ahead and commit to the Eagles at this point, but my early lean is Eagles. If you do like the Eagles, though, I'm with you though. Maybe you do want to take it now if you're for sure going to take them. If you have the Niners, I don't think there's any reason that you have to jump on it right now. I don't really see the game. If it goes down to 2, to 1.5, whatever, that's not really a big deal. But if it ticks 3 and you can hit it at 3, obviously that's a very key number. So I don't think it gets to 3. I think there'd be way too much buyback on the Niners at 3. But hey, you never know. I mean, there's always those chances.
Yep, I agree with you. I think that if there were a 3 that pops up, I could see a 3 popping up. It's one of those things where it's like, it was at book X for 5 minutes, and then it got completely bet down, and it goes back to 2.5. So I do agree with you there, David, and I think that you gave a great pro tip a little bit earlier, vsin.com/subscribe for all of these. Just because there's noise around a situation doesn't mean that you should be betting on that noise. As a matter of fact, fading a lot of this noise is something that is very good. We were seeing that with the Bengals versus the Bills game. Everyone was talking about the offensive line issues, and we were both sort of like, I don't see why this line has gotten up so high. So I thought that was great that you mentioned that. And David, it is always great to have you on the show, recapping all these NFL Sundays and turning it forward. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a fun season, and I'm excited to talk about the championship and get a Super Bowl preview next week. So good luck to everyone out there, and appreciate you.
Visit VSiN.com to get current odds, listen for free, find showtimes, and download VSiN sports betting podcasts.